The trading post door swung open with a groan that matched Ayana's exhaustion. 3 days without food, 5 nights sleeping beneath mesquite bushes, running from the cavalry patrol that had destroyed her village. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the leather pouch at her waist, the last thing her grandmother had given her before the smoke and screams had swallowed everything. Inside, a turquoise pendant wrapped in deerskin, worth enough to buy passage west. Maybe even a new life. "Please," she whispered to the trader, her English broken but desperate. "Food. I trade this." Before anyone could speak, I'd like to take a moment to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to the From Wild West channel and giving this video a like. Your support truly motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Are you at home, on a drive, or perhaps while working? Let me know in the comments. Now, back to our story. The trader's eyes gleamed with greed as he reached for the pendant, but a calloused hand closed over it first. Ayana jerked back, her survival instinct screaming, until she looked up into eyes the color of storm clouds, gray and relentless, but not cruel. "That's worth 10 times what he'd give you," the man said, his voice like gravel smoothed by river water. He was tall, broader than any white man she'd seen, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell past his collar. Scars traced stories across his knuckles. "And you don't need to trade away your grandmother's medicine for a piece of hardtack." He turned to the trader. "Put together a week's provisions. Charge it to the Cross Creek Ranch. Now hold on, Cole." "Do it." The command was soft but absolute. Ayana stood frozen as this stranger, Cole, guided her outside with a gentle hand that never quite touched her. The Arizona sun hammered down on them both, but she noticed he positioned himself so his shadow fell across her face. "I don't take charity from white men," she said, lifting her chin despite the hunger making her lightheaded. "Good thing I'm only half white then." He smiled, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. "My mother was Chiricahua. She'd haunt me forever. If I let one of her people starve while I had means to help." He paused, studying her with an intensity that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. "I've got a ranch 10 miles north. Lost my cook last month when he decided gold prospecting sounded more exciting. Can't pay much, but you'd have a roof, 3 meals, and safety. No obligations beyond honest work, and you keep that pendant. Why would you do this?" "Because gold isn't what we need here," he said quietly. "You are. Someone with your strength, surviving out here alone, that's worth more than any metal." The ranch house appeared on the horizon like a promise. Low-slung adobe walls the color of sunset. A windmill spinning lazily beside a creek that somehow still ran clear in this drought-cursed land. Cole's ranch hand, an older man named Dutch, tipped his hat to her with genuine respect, not the leering assessment she'd learned to expect from settlers. That first night, Cole showed her to a small room off the kitchen, clean, with a real bed and a window facing east for morning prayers. She locked the door and slept 12 hours straight, waking only when the smell of coffee drifted through the walls. The days fell into rhythm like hoofbeats. She cooked, mended, tended the kitchen garden while learning this new life's patterns. Cole worked from before dawn until after dusk, mending fences, breaking horses, doing the labor of 3 men. He spoke little, but she noticed everything. How he always made sure there was fresh water in her room. How he'd leave wildflowers on the kitchen table without comment. How he never entered a space she occupied without announcing himself first. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said one evening. finding her on the porch with her grandmother's pendant clutched tight. "I know men have given you reason to be, but I'll die before I hurt you." She believed him. The teaching began accidentally. Cole found her struggling with a spooked mare in the corral, trying to approach the animal with techniques that worked for Apache horses, but not these nervous ranch breeds. "May I?" he asked, waiting for her nod before entering the space beside her. "They're scared of everything out here. Snakes, shadows, their own tails. You've got to be boring. So boring they forget to panic." His hands moved with infinite patience, showing her how to read the mare's ears, the tension in her hindquarters. When Ayanna tried, he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the sage and leather scent that clung to his skin. "That's it," he murmured when the mare finally accepted her touch. "You're a natural." Over the following weeks, he taught her to ride like a ranch hand instead of a warrior, to shoot his rifle with precision that impressed even Dutch, to track game through terrain that looked identical to her untrained eye. But she taught him too, how to identify medicinal plants, how to read weather and the behavior of insects, how to move through the land as part of it rather than against it. They began to talk during these lessons. She learned he'd built this ranch with his bare hands after leaving the cavalry, disgusted by what he'd been ordered to do to people who looked like his mother. He learned she'd been engaged once to a man in her village who'd been killed in the same raid that scattered her people. "Do you miss him?" Cole asked one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the water catch fire in the sunset. "I miss who I was when he was alive," she said honestly. "I miss believing the world was safe." He was quiet for a long moment. "I promised myself I'd never." He stopped, jaw tight. "After my wife died giving birth to our stillborn son, I swore I'd never open myself up to that kind of pain again. That I'd work this land until it buried me, and that would be enough. And now? Now I'm breaking that promise every time I look at you." The words hung between them like smoke, beautiful and impossible to hold. The trouble came on a Tuesday. Ayanna was in the garden when she heard horses. Too many horses, moving too fast. Her body knew the sound before her mind caught up, and she was running for the house when Cole appeared, rifle in hand, positioning himself between her and the approaching riders. 5 men. The leader wore a colonel's insignia badly, like he'd stolen it off a corpse. She recognized the type immediately. Deserters turned outlaws, the kind who saw Apache women as spoils of war. "That's Apache property you've got there, friend," the colonel called out, his smile showing tobacco-stained teeth. "We're here to collect." "The lady is under my protection," Cole said, his voice carrying across the yard with lethal calm. "And you're trespassing. Turn around now, and I'll forget you came." "See, that's where you're confused. Indians aren't ladies. They're—" He never finished the sentence. Cole's rifle spoke first, sending the colonel's hat flying. The other men reached for their weapons, but Dutch had appeared on the bunkhouse roof, his own rifle trained on the group. "Next shot won't be a warning," Cole said. "Ayanna, get in the house." But she wanted to obey, to let him handle this like he handled everything, with competence and control. But she'd seen enough of these men to know they wouldn't leave without blood, and she'd lost too many people she loved to violence to lose another. The standoff might have ended peacefully if one of the deserters hadn't been young and stupid enough to draw first. The gunshot cracked across the yard, and she watched Cole stagger, red blooming across his left shoulder. He fired back without hesitation, and Dutch followed his lead. But 2 of the outlaws were charging toward the house now, toward her. Ayana's hands found the rifle Cole had taught her to use, muscle memory taking over where thought failed. She fired once, twice, dropping the first man before he reached the porch. The second hesitated, giving Dutch time to take him down. The remaining two outlaws scattered, dragging their wounded colonel with them. Then she was running to Cole, who dropped to one knee, his hand pressed against the spreading bloodstain. Inside, he gritted out, "We need to extract the bullet before—" "Be quiet," she commanded, getting her shoulder under his arm. "Walk." They made it to the kitchen table before his legs gave out. Dutch held him steady, while she worked with hands that refused to shake, even as her heart threatened to hammer through her ribs. She'd done this before, in her village, but never for someone whose death would tear her apart. "Go slow," Cole gasped as she probed the wound. "It hurts. I'll die before I hurt you," she whispered, throwing his own words back at him. "But this has to be done." She found the bullet lodged against his collarbone, extracted it with forceps sterilized in the fire, packed the wound with yarrow and sage. His blood soaked her hands, warm and terrifying. But she forced herself to be steady, to be the healer her grandmother had trained her to be. It took 2 hours. When she finally bandaged the last of it, Cole's skin was gray, but his eyes were clear. "You saved my life," he said. "You saved mine first. We're even." No, his good hand caught hers, holding tight. "We're not even. We're together. That's different." The fever came that night. Ayana sat beside his bed, with cool cloths and willow bark tea, watching him drift in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he spoke in English, sometimes in broken Spanish, once in what she recognized as Chiricahua Apache, learned at his mother's knee. She answered in all 3 languages, keeping him anchored to the living world through the sound of her voice. "Don't leave," he mumbled during the worst of it. "Can't do this alone anymore." "I'm here," she promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Dawn found him lucid, weak, but clear-eyed. She'd been dozing in the chair beside his bed when his voice woke her. "Ayana." She was at his side instantly, checking his temperature, adjusting his bandages. "The fever broke. You'll heal now." "I need to tell you something." He struggled to sit up, and she helped him, aware of every point where their bodies touched. "That night, the night you shot to save me, you taught me what it means to be a man." She frowned. "I don't understand. I thought being a man meant not needing anyone, being strong enough, tough enough, independent enough that I'd never be vulnerable again." His gray eyes held hers with devastating honesty. "But watching you stand your ground, seeing you fight for something you believed was worth protecting, me, I realized I had it backwards. Being a man means being worth protecting. Being someone who makes another person say, 'Him, I'll fight for him.' You did that for me. Cole." "Let me finish." He reached for her hand, his grit still weak but determined. "I've been half alive since I lost my family. Working this land, existing but not living. You didn't just save my body yesterday. You've been saving everything else, piece by piece, since the day you walked into that trading post." He paused, and she saw fear flicker across his face. Fear of rejection, of hoping for too much. "I love you, Ayana. Not because you're convenient, or because you cook well, or because you're beautiful, though you're all of those things. I love you because you're you. Because you see a person when you look at me, not what I can provide or what I represent. You see me." Her grandmother's pendant felt heavy against her chest. The last piece of her old life, the thing she'd been willing to trade away. Now she understood why she'd held on to it through everything, not because of its value in turquoise and silver, but because of what it represented: continuity, survival, the ability to carry your history while building your future. That night, she said slowly, you taught me something too. What? That I could trust again, that not every strong man uses his strength to take. Some use it to protect, to nurture, to make space for others to be strong too. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Cole Madison. I think I have since you told that traitor that gold wasn't what you needed. What do I need? This, she whispered, leaning in to kiss him softly, carefully, mindful of his injury, but unable to deny them both any longer. Us, together. His good arm pulled her closer, and she went willingly, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. The kiss deepened, became something that spoke of promises and futures, and all the lonely nights that led them both to this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole grinned despite the pain it caused him. Marry me. You're delirious from blood loss. I'm clear-headed for the first time in 5 years. Marry me, Ayanna. Not because you need protection or a home, but because we're better together than apart. Because I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, teaching you, building something real with you. She thought of the girl who'd walked into that trading post, desperate enough to trade away her grandmother's blessing for a meal. That girl was still part of her, but she wasn't that girl anymore. She'd become someone who could fight, who could heal, who could love without losing herself. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. They were wed a month later, once Cole had healed enough to stand without swaying. The ceremony blended her traditions and his. Apache blessings spoken over a Catholic prayer, sage smoke mixing with candlelight. Dutch served as witness, along with 2 neighboring ranchers who'd proven themselves trustworthy. She wore flowers in her hair and her grandmother's pendant around her neck. Cole wore his best shirt and held her hand like it was more precious than water in drought. Do you take this woman to be your wife? Dutch asked, playing priest with surprising dignity. I do. I take her as my partner, my equal, the person I choose to face whatever comes with. And do you take this man to be your husband? Ayanna looked at Cole, at his scars and strength, at the gentleness in his eyes and the steel in his spine. I do. I take him as he is, knowing he sees me as I am, and that's enough. That's everything. The kiss that sealed their vows tasted like promises kept and futures unfolding. When they broke apart, the small gathering cheered, and for the first time since her village burned, Ayanna felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because someone had given her shelter, but because she'd claimed a place beside someone who saw her worth. The ranch thrived under their partnership. She taught him the agricultural techniques her people had perfected over generations: companion planting, water conservation, seasonal reading. He taught her the business side: contracts, breeding records, market timing. Together, they built something neither could have achieved alone. Years later, sitting on that same porch where he'd first promised not to hurt her, watching their children play in the creek, Ayanna would remember that trading post moment. How close she'd come to giving up her last connection to her grandmother, her history, herself. What are you thinking? Cole asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. That I'm glad you stopped me that day. That you saw what I couldn't. That I was worth more than any transaction. You taught me the same thing, he said quietly. That night when you stood between me and death, when you fought for my life like it mattered. You taught me what it means to be a man. Not strong because I need no one, but strong because someone needs me. Strong enough to be needed, to be vulnerable, to admit that I'm better with you than without you." She leaned into him, feeling the solid reality of their life together. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real. Built on mutual respect and hard-won trust and love that had been tested and proven true. "Together," she said, the word they'd made their own. "Together," he agreed, and kissed her beneath the stars that had witnessed every step of their journey. In the distance, a coyote called, and the wind carried the scent of sage across the land they'd made their own. Not his land or her land, but theirs. A place where an Apache woman and a half-white rancher could build a life that honored both their histories while creating something entirely new. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined. It was better, because they'd found it together. The first winter tested them in ways neither expected. Snow fell heavy that year, burying the ranch under white silence that lasted for weeks. Cole's shoulder, still healing, ached with every temperature drop, and Ayanna would wake in the night to find him sitting by the fire, trying to hide his pain. "Let me help," she said one particularly brutal night, mixing a poultice her grandmother had taught her. The scent of wintergreen and arnica filled their small bedroom. "I'm fine," he insisted, that stubborn pride rising. She knelt before him, meeting his eyes with gentle firmness. "Being a man doesn't mean suffering alone. It means trusting your partner enough to share the burden. Or have you forgotten what you taught me?" His resistance crumbled. As she worked the medicine into his shoulder, her fingers traced the scarred tissue, the physical reminder of the day everything changed. He leaned into her touch, and she felt him finally surrender the last walls he'd kept between them. "It scares me sometimes," he admitted quietly, "how much I need you." "Good," she whispered against his ear, "because I need you just as much, and I'd hate to be afraid alone." That night they made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with new tenderness. She discovered the other scars he carried: the knife wound from his cavalry days, the rope burn from a braking accident, the crooked rib that never set quite right. He mapped her skin like sacred territory, finding the small marks of her own survival, the burn from a cooking fire, the puncture scar from a mountain lion attack she'd survived as a child, the faint lines on her wrists from the ropes the soldiers had used during the raid. "You're beautiful," he breathed, and she knew he meant more than her face. He meant all of her, the survivor, the fighter, the woman who'd refused to break. "So are you," she said, meaning the same thing. Outside, the wind howled against the adobe walls, but inside, they were warm, together, complete. By spring, Ayanna discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning as she stood in the kitchen, suddenly overwhelmed by the smell of coffee, a scent that had never bothered her before. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, and she knew. Terror and joy warred inside her. Cole had lost his first wife and child to childbirth. How could she tell him? How could she risk breaking the fragile happiness they'd built? But secrets had no place in what they'd created together. She found him in the corral, working with a young stallion that needed gentling. He looked up at her approach, and whatever he saw in her face made him vault the fence immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took his hand, placed it over her stomach. "I'm with child." The color drained from his face. For a moment, she saw the ghost of the man who'd lost everything, the man who'd sworn never to risk his heart again. Then something shifted. She watched him choose hope over fear, choose faith in her strength, choose to believe this time could be different. "You're afraid," she said softly. "Terrified," he admitted. "But I'm more afraid of not living fully because of what might happen. You taught me that. You taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's loving someone so much that you face the fear anyway." He pulled her close, and she felt the tremor in his hands, the rapid beat of his heart. "We'll face this together," he promised. "Whatever comes." "Together," she agreed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and into fall. Cole treated her like she was made of glass until she threatened to sleep in the barn if he didn't stop hovering. Dutch laughed himself hoarse, watching them negotiate this new dynamic. Cole wanting to protect her from everything. Ayanna insisting she could still work, still ride, still be herself. "Your woman's got more fire than a chili pepper," Dutch told Cole one afternoon. "Better let her burn how she wants to, or you'll get scorched trying to contain her." Cole knew Dutch was right. So he learned to step back, to offer help but not insist, to trust Ayanna's judgment about her own body and capabilities. It was harder than breaking wild horses, this letting go. But he did it because he loved her more than his fear. One October evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Ayanna felt the baby move for the first time. She grabbed Cole's hand, pressed it against her belly. "Wait for it," she whispered. Then it came, a flutter, a roll, a tiny confirmation of the life growing inside her. Cole's face transformed, awe replacing anxiety, and she saw tears track down his weathered cheeks. "Hello, little one," he murmured to her belly. "We're going to love you so much. Your mother is the strongest person I know, and I promise, I'll spend every day making sure you know how lucky you are to be hers." The baby kicked again, as if in answer, and they both laughed through their tears. Winter returned, and with it came the labor. It started just before dawn, waking Ayanna with a pain that wrapped around her back like iron bands. She shook Cole awake, saw panic flash across his face before he forced it down, replaced it with the calm competence she'd learned to rely on. "Dutch, get the midwife from town," he ordered, already moving to help Ayanna to their bed. "Ride fast." But nature had its own timeline. The contractions came harder, faster, and Ayanna knew with absolute certainty that this baby wouldn't wait for any midwife. "Cole," she gasped between pains. "It's too soon. She's coming now." She watched him swallow his terror, saw him square his shoulders and become exactly what she needed: steady, present, unshakable. "Tell me what to do," he said simply. So she did. Drawing on knowledge passed down through generations of Apache women, she guided him through it. When the pain became unbearable, when she thought she couldn't endure another moment, he was there, wiping her forehead, holding her hand, telling her she was strong enough, brave enough, that he believed in her. "Go slow," she panted at one point, gripping his hand hard enough to leave marks. "It hurts." "I know, love," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But you can do this. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Just a little more. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." The sun was fully risen when their daughter finally arrived, announcing herself with a furious cry that filled the small bedroom. Cole caught her with shaking hands, stared down at the tiny, perfect creature they'd created together. "It's a girl," he said, wonder making his voice thick. "Ayanna, we have a daughter." He placed the baby on Ayanna's chest, and she looked down at the small face, Cole's gray eyes in her bronze skin, a shock of dark hair, tiny fists waving with indignation at being born into cold air. Hello, little warrior, Ayana whispered, exhausted and elated and utterly in love. Welcome to the world. Cole kissed them both, his wife, his daughter, and she saw the last shadow of his past grief finally lift. This wasn't a replacement for what he'd lost. This was something entirely new, entirely theirs, proof that survival could transform into thriving. What should we name her? He asked. Ayana thought of her grandmother, of the pendant that had brought her to this moment. Sakyo, she said. It means mink in my language. Small, but fierce. Sakyo Madison, Cole repeated, testing the sound. She'll need to be fierce with you as her mother. She'll need to be gentle with me as her father. Perfect balance. Dutch returned with the midwife an hour later to find all three of them asleep. Cole stretched on the bed beside Ayana, one protective arm around her, the other cradling their daughter against his chest. The midwife checked them all, pronounced mother and baby healthy, and left them to their rest. That night, Cole kept watch while Ayana slept. He studied his daughter's face in the lamplight, counting her fingers and toes, marveling at her existence. She was so small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on them. The responsibility should have terrified him, but instead he felt a fierce joy he'd never experienced before. I promise you, he whispered to the sleeping infant, I'll teach you everything I know, how to ride, how to track, how to read the sky for weather. But more important, I'll teach you what your mother taught me, that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to accept support, when to trust someone else with your whole heart. Sakyo yawned, a tiny sound that was almost comical, and settled deeper against his chest. You taught me what it means to be a man, he said, though whether he was speaking to his daughter or his wife, even he wasn't sure. Both of you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that lesson. The seasons turned, and Sakyo grew. She learned to walk holding both her parents' hands, learned to speak in a mixture of English, Spanish, and Apache that delighted everyone who heard it. She learned to ride almost before she could run, sitting in front of Cole on his big roan stallion, laughing with pure joy at the speed. But she learned deeper lessons too, from Ayana. She learned which plants healed and which harmed, learned to track game by signs most people would miss, learned the stories of her people and the importance of remembering where you came from. From Cole, she learned to gentle horses with patience, to aim a rifle with respect for its power, to keep your word because integrity was worth more than gold. Most importantly, she learned what love looked like. Not the soft, easy kind that required no sacrifice, but the daily kind, the kind that showed up when things were hard, that chose partnership over pride, that admitted mistakes and worked through conflicts with honesty and grace. One evening, when Sakyo was 5 years old, she found her mother on the porch with tears on her face. Ayana was holding her grandmother's pendant, the turquoise, catching the last light of day. "Mama, why are you sad?" Ayana pulled her daughter close. "Not sad, little one. Grateful. I was remembering the day I almost traded this away for food. I was so scared and alone. I thought I had nothing left worth keeping." "But you kept it," Sakyo said, touching the pendant with reverent fingers. "I did. And because I did, I met your father. And because I met your father, I found my way here. And because I found my way here, I have you." She kissed the top of Sakyo's head. Sometimes the things we think we need to survive, food, shelter, safety, those things matter. But what we need to truly live is connection, purpose, love. Like you and Papa? Yes, exactly like me and Papa. Cole emerged from the barn just then, saw his two favorite people silhouetted against the sunset, and felt his heart clench with the kind of sweet pain that comes from having everything you ever wanted. He joined them on the porch, pulling them both into his arms. "What are we talking about?" he asked. "Mama was telling me about the pendant," Sakyo explained, "about how she almost traded it away, but you said she was worth more than gold." Cole met Ayana's eyes over their daughter's head. "I said gold wasn't what we needed. I said she was what we needed, and I've never spoken truer words in my life." That night, after Sakyo was asleep, Cole and Ayana made love with the comfortable passion of people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterward, lying tangled in the sheets, Ayana traced the old bullet wound on his shoulder. "Does it still hurt?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Sometimes, when the weather changes. But it's a good kind of pain. The kind that reminds me how close I came to missing all of this." He captured her hand, brought it to his lips. "That night you saved my life. You taught me what it means to be a man. Not invincible, not unbreakable, but worthy of being fought for. Worthy of being loved enough that someone would stand between me and death." "You did the same for me," she reminded him. "That day in the trading post, you stood between me and desperation. You saw me when I couldn't see myself." "We saved each other," he said simply. "Yes, and we keep saving each other. Every day. That's what love is. Choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Outside, a coyote sang to the moon, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Inside, the life they'd built together continued. Imperfect, beautiful, real, built on mutual respect and hard-won trust and love that had been tested and proven true. Years would pass. There would be more children, two sons who had their mother's eyes and their father's stubborn jaw. There would be droughts and good years, losses and celebrations, the normal rhythm of life lived fully. The ranch would expand, become known throughout the territory as a place where people of all backgrounds could find fair treatment and honest work. But no matter how much time passed, Cole would sometimes wake in the night, reach for Ayana, and marvel at how close he'd come to living only half a life. And Ayana would wake too, feeling his touch, remembering the girl who'd been so desperate she'd considered trading away her last connection to her history. "Together," she'd whisper in the darkness. "Together," he'd answer, and they'd drift back to sleep, secure in the knowledge that they'd found something rare and precious. A love built not on need or desperation, but on choice. The choice to see each other clearly, to fight for each other fiercely, to build a life that honored both their pasts while creating something entirely new. In the end, that was the greatest lesson they could teach their children. That true strength comes not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand together. That courage means facing your fears for something, someone worth protecting. That love, real love, is both the gentlest and the strongest force in the world. And beneath the vast Arizona sky, under stars that had witnessed countless stories of survival and loss and hope, the Madison family thrived, living proof that sometimes the broken pieces, when put together with care and intention, create something even more beautiful than what existed before. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Cole and Ayana's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.